Welcome to week 8 of the NFL season. You're watching Fantasy Football Weekly with me, Jonathan Kriegel. This week, I've got tight end rankings, flex rankings. I want to talk about Peyton Manning's touchdown record. And in theme of Halloween, I've got some spooky good players and some players who have been freaky bad. So let's start off with those tight end rankings. First, I want to talk about Greg Olsen. He has been spectacular this year. He's the top 3 at tight ends, and he is playing Seattle, who shockingly has not been good against tight ends, and you have to think Greg Olsen will be the next tight end to do very well against Seattle. Then, I want to talk about Dwayne Allen. He's been sneaking under the radar. He's been one of Andrew Luck's top targets. I like him this week. The only problem with him is Colby Fleener has also been getting a lot of targets, but Dwayne Allen's the better of the two, and sooner or later he'll be their top tight end and doing wonderful things for your team from this point on. And finally, I want to talk about Jimmy Graham. He hasn't been very good this year, but when he is healthy, he is outstanding, and I expect him sooner or later to pick it back up and be the top tight end he can be. This week, I see him in the top 10 because there's not much else out there, and for how good he is, you're not really going to want to bench him if he's playing. Now I want to talk about a tight end who already played this week, and that was Julius Thomas, and I want to talk about how him and his quarterback have been outstanding this year. Peyton Manning is just incredible. He broke the touchdown record and is now at 514 career touchdowns. This year he is at 22 touchdowns, and his number one target this year is Julius Thomas with 9. Julius Thomas would have been in my top 10 rankings, but because he already played on Thursday night, I could not include him. But for next week, he's definitely my number one tight end, even if Jimmy Graham is healthy. Now, when you look at these other players who he has touchdowns to, it's kind of surprising to see Wes Welker so low. I expect him to turn around at one point, but with Emmanuel Sanders being so hot recently, it's a little worrisome if you're a Wes Welker owner. But I wouldn't freak out too much. It is Peyton Manning. He gets the ball around, and you gotta think Wes Welker will get some touchdowns and plenty of yards because he's a very good receiver and a very good offense. Now, let's talk about my flex rankings. Here they are. First, I want to talk about my number 5 player, Jordy Nelson, the wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. He has been on fire. He is Aaron Rodgers' number 1 target, and you got to like him every single week he is playing. And then I want to go to my number 10 player, Lamar Miller. He gets to go up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. He has been very good as well, and I like him this week as my running back. If you're lucky enough to have 3 great running backs and he can be in your flex, start him. Now, to continue my flex rankings, here is number 11 through 20. I want to talk about my number 13 player, Julio Jones. Julio Jones has been off and on this year. He's been injured, but I see him slowly getting back to health and being a top 20 player in my flex rankings, a top 5 wide receiver this week. Now I want to go down to number 20, Justin Forsett. He has been really good this year. He's the Ravens' number 1 running back because Ray Rice is suspended and Bernard Pierce hasn't been very good, so Forsett's been the guy. I was dumb enough to drop him. I wish I still had him, obviously, because he's been great. He's in the top 20 at his position, and he's a no-brainer flex starter for your team. Now let's get into the Halloween mood and talk about players who have been spooky good and freaky bad. Let's start with those players who have been spooky good. Ryan Tannehill has averaged a little under 21 points per game, but he's worth starting if you are lacking at quarterback, and he's playing the Jaguars, which is a good matchup. Aaron Rodgers, obviously owned in all leagues, but he has been incredible. The Packers have been scoring bunches and bunches of points, and he has averaged 22.83 points per game in the last 3 games, which is great, and it shows why he is the elite quarterback he is. And then at running back, Matt Forte. He's averaged over 23 points per game in the last 3 games. He's been on fire. Don't know how good he'll do this week against the Patriots, but he has shown that he is a better running back than he was in the first couple weeks. Now I want to talk about the players who have been freaky bad in the last 3 games. Zach Stacy has scored just a little over 3 points per game, which is not good at all. It looks like his time as their number 1 starter at running back is over. If you can get anything for him, trade him. He's not worth starting anytime soon. And now Matt Ryan. He was my starting fantasy quarterback. He is no longer because he has only scored a little over 13 points per game, which is not good for a quarterback unless he shows something otherwise. I am not going to be having him in my lineup anytime soon. I'm not going to drop him quite yet because he is such a good player. He is not worth just giving up on right now totally, but he's not worth starting. Now, Alfred Morris. He has only scored a little over 7 points per game, which is not terrible, but for him is not good, and he hasn't scored a touchdown recently, but it is Alfred Morris. I see him turning around at some point, but I don't know if he's worth starting every week. Alright, that's going to sum up Week 8 of Fantasy Football Weekly. I hope you like, comment, subscribe. Next week I've got quarterback rankings, running back rankings. If you need any fantasy football advice, please leave a comment. I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Good luck, and I'll talk to you next week.